Okay, Isabel, could you tell us some of the important moments in your life which make you what you are? You are so passionate, so committed, but what was it in your life?
Well, maybe I should start that I was born in a patriotic home, particularly my parents, my father, besonders, that's the German word. And I had my primary studies in a municipal school. It was a sort of public school that put me in contact with people of that were not rich or neither middle class or something like that, and I think all that so helped me to be the way I am. My parents were very open, very democratic toward neighbors and people around, and I was born in that atmosphere. But my mother was very, very religious, Catholic, so I also had a Catholic learning. I had to go to catechism as a child. I think all that was important too, because it gave me a culture which is part of the history of the world in which I was born and in which I developed myself. And I am glad of that. I think it also gives me, together with the other elements, some sort of spirit of tolerance and open-minded. And for me, it's not difficult, for example, to understand the religious feelings of other people, because I was born within it and I had it myself at a particular period of time. That would be say that the sort of the beginning. Then I did study to become a teacher. We were 9 brothers and sisters. I was the youngest, which was no privilege at all in my family. On the contrary, you were the less important thing. So your opinion didn't count, or I mean, they love me a lot, they care about me, but you are not important being the youngest, because the other people are all more important, you see. And I don't know if that was good or bad, but it's part of the life. So I graduated in a normal school, which are the way it's called, it was called at the time, escuelas normales. But I couldn't work as a teacher. There was no work available at the time, so I could get into the university to study pedagogy, which in English is education, yeah. So, and at that time I got interested in what was called at the time, I don't know how it's called today, special education, so children with problems. I thought I could do that, research and treat complicated cases and so forth, including children with psychological problems. So I didn't have a work, but I did participate in a group of with other people, psychiatrists, psychologists, and so forth, working with for a couple of years, something like that, children with problems. So I applied to scholarship in the United States, and I got the scholarship for special education. This scholarship was in California, San Francisco State College, which at the time was, let's say, a young college, and later it became very well known in the world because about 10 years or so later, 15 years later, was one of the center of study, unrest and protest and so forth. But in any case, I was there. And being there, so I was, let's say, compelled, according to the planning that the advisor made, to get into a class of philosophy of education. And that was a turning point again in my life. So I sort of discovered a world I didn't know it existed. So, and I had a very good teacher for that subject. So I was no longer interested in special education, but became more and more interested in philosophy of education and visions of life and theory about things and so forth. So I attended the summer school at Harvard then. I took courses in one on 20th century philosophy and one on philosophy of education, and then I applied for the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I came back to Cuba, but I was accepted at Harvard Graduate School of Education and got back to the United States. So I spent another year in the United States at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. That was really very good for me. Of course, the point of view is a point of view that I could not accept, but they were so serious, so demanding in how you say, how to you argue, how you support your belief, and so forth. So in that sense, I am grateful. I'm grateful to my advisor, Professor Scheffler, and for philosophy education, it included to take courses also at the same time in philosophy, in philosophy as such. So I took courses in the philosophy department as well, and I was also happy to be a student of Morton G. White, which was a well-known figure of the American philosophy at the time. Of course, Harvard was at the time, and I think still is, the analytic philosophy. I'm happy I had that. I'm happy I had that because it ordered your mind. It's very demanding, was very demanding. At the time, I already didn't attend church anymore, so I just couldn't follow that. I first became agnostic. I was very proud at the time, you know, when you are 24, 25, you say, I'm agnostic. Eh? And so first I became agnostic, and finally I became, how do you say in English, atheist. Politically, I was moving toward a mixture of many beliefs, incoherence, some influences of some Latin American movement of the time, that then many years afterward I became to understand that we're no left or anything, but at the time it sounded to me very radical with a new point of view. In my positions, I was already anti-imperialist, but I didn't know. I wouldn't use that. It wouldn't come to my mind. But I was very keen about the American domination over Latin America, and particularly in Cuba, because that domination in Cuba in the 50s was, and the 40s, of course, was enormous. And we also had some experiences, you can name them anecdotes even, but they gave the image of what American imperialism was in Cuba. It was the day that some drunk Marines climbed into Marty's statue in the Central Park and urinate Marty. So I find no words, not even in Spanish, if I were speaking Spanish, to express, to transmit the feeling that this whole situation, this whole anecdote brought to us. Of course, even before my scholarship, there was this coup d'etat of Batista. And that was also an enormous experience, very, very shocking. It impressed me enormously. I felt so ashamed that such a thing was happening to us. I felt so lack of power, lack of possibility of doing anything. That political and social reality escaped absolutely out of the hand of everybody. And there was like lack of spark, absolutely. I remember at home when the news came up, we would move from one chair to the other at home. We just drop ourselves into the chair, looking at the floor in absolute despair. And for a period of time, I believe in the Pacific possibility, political solution. There was a mediation, several months afterward. There was a creation of this mediation with an important figure of our civil society, and I sort of believe that that was the way of dealing about things. Now, of course, Fidel's attack on this Moncada and so forth was the armed answer to the situation. I did not accept this way, but I was proud of what they did. I felt enormous admiration at the time, like the whole people of Cuba, about what they had done. And I remember my father, that was already a very old man, saying, well, there are still men in Cuba ready to die for the land, for the homeland, and so forth. And so that was the feeling. But I still thought, okay, political means is the real way, and so forth. So, but while I was still in the United States and I was at Harvard, I remember that it became clear to me that this political mean was no way out. And so I said to myself, Fidel is right, and that's the way. So as soon as I finished my studies, it was one year, and that was about September, more or less, maybe October, maybe August, about September 57, that would be. I returned to Cuba. So as soon as I arrived to Cuba, I started trying to get in touch with people of 26th of July movement, that was Fidel's movement, together with my sister, one of my sisters, the one that was closer, well, not closer from the point of view of spiritual, because I was very close to many of my brothers and sisters, but I was the younger and she came next, you know, so, and we decided both to look after that connection, so finally got it. So before the year 57 ended, we got this. First we helped with looking for medicines and maybe clothes. They would give us some bonus like this that would sell for money for the movement and so forth. But finally we got a good contact before the year 57 was over, and we really got we became militant of the 26th July movement. And already in December or something like that, we did certain things that were so important. Interruption for a dear friend, querido amigo.
Okay.
Un gran beso.
Está bien, pero no vayas, sí te oigo, pero no vayas a salir para este aguacero.
Okay.
¿Por qué si escampa? ¿Y por qué si escampa no te llegas aquí al libro?
Querido, están... sí.
He saw you, he didn't say this. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, and so my sister and I became militant of the 26th of July movement, and actually the people with whom we got in contact were at the head of the movement in the province of Pinar del Rio. We should keep in mind that at the time Cuba had 6 provinces. It's not like today that we have so many. And we were in Havana, province Havana, that included the whole province, so this what today is city of Havana and the rest, and then there was Pinar del Rio. So actually we did work from Havana, staying in Havana, living in Havana, but in connection with Pinar del Rio. For example, we were particularly messengers between the direction of the movement in Havana and Pinar del Rio, and the direction of Pinar del Rio with the national coordinators of the 26th of July. Maybe we brought, how do you say, changing the place where the arms were from one place to the other, bringing bullets from Pinar del Rio to Havana, carrying under our clothes the bonus, the propaganda. So they would come big package like this of propaganda would come to our home, and we were responsible of the transportation of that to Pinar del Rio and so forth. So we became more and more involved, and some colleagues in the 26th of July with a sense of humor named my sister and I how do you say that in English? I forgot. When two people are equal born, twins. I forgot, twins. They name us the twins. And you know, in Spanish there is the feminine, so it was very clear that there were two girls that were twins. We were not twins at all, but that helped to confuse the police. They were, for many months, they were looking for the twins, which didn't exist. So finally, there was a traitor inside here in Havana with whom we made some transportation of guns and so forth. So. But we sort of became aware that there was some big problem, so we left the home, our home, my sister and I and my mother. So when finally one of the criminals of the Batista police in Havana, Ventura was his name, came to our home, which was an apartment in Vedado, with machine guns and all that, we were not there anymore. But of course then we went to the underground and kept working with the 26th of July movement. So my sister moved to Pinar del Rio, still working with the colleagues there, and I stay in Havana City working with another colleagues and another section of our movement here in Havana. So by the end of '58, I don't remember, it was maybe September, October, no, in my case was November. In the case of my sister, maybe it was October. Batista police got her first, and then in November, Batista police got me here in Havana. But you see, these are the characteristics in countries like ours. Latin American, Cuban, and how things work in our society, because my uncle was the best surgeon of the country, and as such had many connections, very much respected. He treated Fidel's mother, Fidel's son, but Batista's wife, and the chief of the army's wife, so that's the characteristic. And in my case, the police institution that grabbed me, that got me, at the head of it was one of the criminals of Batista, but knew my uncle. So the first thing he did, when they got me, he wasn't there, and they started mistreating me. But as soon as he got there and he learned that one of Rodriguez was my uncle's, was there, the first thing he did was to call my uncle. And then nothing bad happened to me, but of course I had to leave the country. That was they took me, so I had part of my family in the United States, in particular one of my sisters. We were very close to her, that was married to an American professor of the University of Princeton. They were therefore about an hour away from New York, where there was the most active, one of the two most active centers of the 26th of July in the United States. So we got there, and my sister was already working with the movement, not too much because she was living in Princeton. So as soon as I got there, I started already doing things, whatever was possible, not too much, because there we were in the United States, we were not supposed to do other things like propaganda and moving and supporting and this and that. But one of the colleagues from Pinal del Rio was organizing transportation of arms in a ship to Pinal del Rio. The idea was to transport the arms throughout the United States territory from New York to the border in Mexico. There he would take care of the transportation. He would take care of it to cross the border to Mexico, and then they will sail from Mexico to Pinal del Rio. So when he knew that my sister and I were there, and when he had this job to do, the two people he had confidence in doing such a thing were my sister and I, because colleagues in militants in New York didn't have experience of this insurrectional work and secrecy and all that. So that's what we did. We started to do. They prepared 2 cars loaded with guns and bullets and whatsoever, and we were supposed to do this transportation. I don't remember, it was San Antonio, someplace in Texas. So one car took another car. That was already end of December. And the colleague that they found to drive my car didn't have much experience. So we had a car accident, and we were stuck in the middle of the state of Ohio, in a small town called Hillsborough. I won't remember that, you know, with my age, I forget many things today, but these things I don't forget. So, in any case, we couldn't continue the trip. We had to the car was taken by, how do you call, I forget many things in English, where they repair cars. In many things, then small things happen. I don't want to make the story too long. The thing is that they discovered the guns. They told the police. We were in this small hotel in Hillsborough, my Cuban colleague that was driving, and you see, we were in this small hotel when Batista was kicked out of power, and we were in front of the television, the hotel, the whole Cuban people in the street celebrated, and we were there looking like we didn't care at all. We couldn't be happy, we couldn't say anything. Then that was the 1st of January, and we were there, we didn't care. But we went then to pick up the car, which of course the idea was return to New York. But the police was waiting for us in this, how did the workshop, or no, it's a workshop for mechanics, yeah, where they repair car. And it was stupid and funny, because it was like a Hollywood, all people around with guns, and we didn't have gun or anything with us. What is that? So in any case, this absolutely ridiculous situation, I went to jail in the United States on the 2nd of January. So that was really ridiculous. So, well, in any case, we stayed there a couple of days, and of course there was already the revolutionary government here, so we finally, the whole thing a solution was found, and then I drove back to Princeton, where my sister was. The sister I was living in the United States, my other sister, the one from Cuba, she had already returned to Cuba, I had certain things to do still at Harvard, so I stayed through, I don't know, 3-4 more weeks in the United States, and then I came back to Cuba. When I came back to Cuba, I started, let's say, work entre semicolons, in the 26th of July movement and organization. So I was in charge, I was member of the, the board for the province of Havana. I forgot even in the Spanish the name of all the things, you know, even in Spanish. So, and they, they made me responsible for adoctrination. Do you say in English adoctrination? No. It's like working with ideology also, but there was no specific ideology for us in the 26th of July movement. There were so many tendencies. I was not one of the most radicals at the left, but I was not the most moderate. My mind was still trying to work out what to think. I do remember now that for the 7th of December of '58, when we were still in the United States, there was a big meeting in one of the big halls in New York. 7th of December is a patriotic date of Cuba, the death of Maceo, and the colleagues of the 26th of July movement asked me to speak in the name of the women of the 26th of July movement. And in my intervention, there was few minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know, maybe 7 minutes. I said, we women do not fight only to kick out, how do you say, to throw out, yeah, Batista from power. We want agrarian reform, we want freedom, we want a real independent country that make decisions, women are to, and things like that. And years later, I learned from one of the colleagues that were there that my speech was so radical, and people there were sort of angry and they felt unhappy about my speech. Then that I became aware that sometimes maybe I was too radical, but it's also, it gives the image of how many tendencies were inside of the 26th of July. But for some of my colleagues in Cuba, militant, on the contrary, I was too moderate, so, so that was it. I was not a Marxist, but I was already anti-imperialist. I had my first reading of Karl Marx being at Harvard. I didn't embrace Marx's ideas, but I said, I think he's right in the idea that there has to be some kind of order in the evolution of history. It cannot be a random thing, it cannot be a disorder. There has to be some kind of order, of law, or sense in all that. So I already, if you want certain seeds, so I could become later a Marxist, were already there. But I was far away from the idea of class struggle and all that. So in any case, I was working in Havana here in the 26th of July movement, and I was in charge of that. I was a member of the direction of the board here in Havana for this department that I said, we call in Spanish, adoctrinamiento. So you say in English doctrine? Yes, I think you do. So, well, I don't know, it's making ideological work for consciousness and so forth. But I became interested being there in culture. And it was not in the tradition of 26th of July movement to attend, let's say, this branch, no branch, yes, that's English. So the situation was that I transformed my department in adoctrinamiento and culture. So I started working together with people from theater and people that were making research in folklore and music and so forth. And the core of these people with whom I became in contact and started to work for the 26th of July movement were really people from the left in the cultural movement in Cuba. So little by little I became more interested in the cultural work. And I said, no, let's divide this. Somebody else take care of adoctrinamiento. On the other hand, what can you teach when you don't have an ideology and still we didn't know where we're going and so forth. So I dedicated all my effort to culture. But I still was member of the board. And let's see, some colleagues that were in charge, let's say like the mayor, the mayor is French, you know, who was in charge of a municipality, the mayor, yes, yeah, it's not like French, it's French. And so they requested, and I became vice director of the Department of Bellas Artes in municipality of Havana, but I was still member of the 26th of July and at the board.
So we were at the place where you were the vice.
Yes, I remember now. Okay, I became vice director of Bellas Artes. I was there very short time actually, so it's not worthwhile talking about it. I couldn't do anything because the director wouldn't let me do anything. But the thing is that 2 months afterwards, I was nominated at the head of the Cuban National Theater, which was in construction. And the institution was dependent from the Minister of Education. So at the head of the Minister of Education was Armando Hart. And I really don't know how my name came up, how I was nominated there. And so I didn't continue with Bellas Artes. I kept my responsibility inside the 26th of July movement at the board. And I became director of the Cuban National Theater. It was in construction, it didn't exist as such. But a great deal was already there, already built. And so with the same people that I was working inside of the 26th of July movement from the cultural movement in Cuba, okay, we all said we kept the work together. We created and the National Theater departments for what would be theater as such, I mean dramatic art, no? And Department of Music, Department of Folklore, which is absolutely a decision that was not in the tradition at all. Dance, and well, the fifth was propaganda, and then a few months later became administration, because we needed that department, while propaganda became a small section. It was not necessary to have a head. The important thing is that we started doing things because, according to the architects, the theater would be finished by such and such a date. So there we worked what was left, 59, 60, 61. The theater wasn't finished. I had already contracted people for a spectacle, and the theater was still unfinished. So we conceived a pre-inauguration period with nude walls, nothing finished, no chairs. We had this, I forgot to do, in Spanish we said sillas tijeras, scissor chairs, the one you open it, and so like that we started. We had already engaged the money, so forth. So what I would underline, that was the work of a whole collective, yeah? But that I'm glad I was part of it. I'm glad I facilitated this whole thing could be done. I'm happy that I did this, the fighting I had to carry out to defend all that at different levels. No money was given to us, but some money from the Batista period was frozen in the banks, so we managed that money was given to us and so forth. So to me, at the time, the thing is that there started really the modern art dance movement. Of course, these people had before already started doing things before the revolution, but they had no meaning, they had nothing. It would be one day in a small place doing something, and that was it. Of course, the people of folklore had done many things in Cuba before, but were absolutely marginal. Now they had the whole theater, they had the means, they have the dancer had their contracts, the rehearsals, they have money for the costume and so forth. So we had an enormous success even under those conditions. For the theater, we were very open-minded. We had at the same, let's say, we would have in a month Sartre, La Ramera Respetuosa, La Putain Respectueuse, how would you say in English, the respectful whore, or something like that would be the translation. There was with the social position, but we would have also American theater, author theater that were very important, and Cuban authors with all conditions, and very important authors of our history, many already that were already dead and so forth. And we started the theater for children. We created the symphony orchestra. We had before in Cuba the Philharmonic, but during the dictatorship, the subvention for all this were stopped, so all that had disappeared. We had to restart it again, and we also one of the characteristic of repertoire was Cuban and Latin American musicians, composers should be also included. Our presentation were not only in the theater, but we made tours in the country. We went to the country to cooperative because the agrarian reform had already been made. We created a semi-professional theater that would go around making positions, and we created the movement for, how do you say, aficionados, like fans. I'm sorry. People that are not professional, are not paid to make theater, but they like it in factories, in the peasants and workers, and afterward they would gather, and we provided the direction for all that and so forth, and there we conceived the art instructor. We conceived this line of work without having the name for it. They started to work, they started doing things, but we didn't have a name for it. of reference. At the time, they were supposed to be paid, and we had to put a name, and then the idea of art instructor came up, and that was they were named, but the concept was before. And we had already organized small courses, short courses, for they could take care of us. So we developed there the line in theater, music, and dance. Dance that included folklore and dance, all that. And actually, that created a whole line of work in the country that did not exist before. So, and in '61, we were invited to participate in the Theatre of Nations in Paris, Théâtre des Nations, au Châtelet, à Paris. And the group of dance, Modern Dance, went there together with some members of the folklore group, because in the conception of modern art, of modern dance, the influence of Cuban folklore was very important. They had a success in Paris. Afterward, they also traveled some socialist countries of the period. And then, of course, there was the creation of the, in '61, the Cuban government created the National Council for Culture. And of course, the whole structure for culture in the country for the revolution changed. And the National Theatre had still not been finished. So what it was done, and we cooperated on all that, is we handed over all what we had created to this National Council for Culture. We handed over all that to the National Council for Culture. It was like a gift there, because it was enormous work, and we gave everything. And for year '62, the department for this popular culture with the instructor of art and the groups and all that, and I was nominated the head of that, since I was the one that started the whole thing. And well, that was that. And but at the same time, I became a professor at the University of Havana at the Faculty of Education, and I participated as member of one of the committee for the university reform. So I was doing all the things at the same time. That's what I tell you, it's too complicated. So I am making it as short as I can, because all this was at the same time parallel, you know, you are parallel. That was at the beginning of the revolution, year 60, 61, things like that. And I was teaching then at the university, in the faculty. At the time it was faculty, it was school, I forgot. Well, in the school, I think, of education. But then, as a result of the university reform, a small group was created for philosophy and Marxism. And I was looking after that. I was looking for, because in the main special field, it was not included. But I got contact, and I learned that this small group was created within the School of Political Science or Social Science, something like that. Because you have this transition period with the old divisions of the university and the new one as a result of the reform. So that's why. So I left education and started working in this small group. It was not even a department. They were about 8, I think I was number 9 or 10 or something like that. And it was the core, the beginning of what became afterward the Department of Philosophy, which was particularly for the teaching of Marxism. And maybe some courses of history of philosophy as a service department. You see, you don't have students of your own, but you serve other faculty or schools, because in the structure were faculties and schools, and then departments. So this was. So there was a period I was at the same time as the head of the department in culture for this movement and structure of art and the whole movement of aficionados, etc., and teaching at the university. I was no longer in a political, say, professional work or that. So then I quit in my post for culture. I stay only as professor at the university, which was a good decision. So I was teaching Marxism at the university and history of philosophy. That was either one or the other. Well, at a certain moment, I don't know if this is of any interest of you, I really had many contradictions with the mainstream of thought at this Department of Philosophy for Marxism and so forth, and actually I couldn't keep working with them. They really made my life miserable, and so I quit. And as a result, I couldn't teach Marxism anymore. And I couldn't even teach history of philosophy anymore. And fortunately, in the school of literature and art, there were various people there that were very close to me, because we worked together in culture and so forth. So as part of my work, before I had started also teaching in a subject that was Panorama de la Cultura Cubana, so an overview of Cuban culture. And we would carry that teaching. One of us will teach literature and art. The other one would teach history as a basis in relation with that. And I was in charge of thinking of the history of Cuban thought. So what saved me, let's say, that I could stay at the university after I couldn't teach what I was prepared mostly to teach, but I was also specialized in Cuban culture as part of history of philosophy. So I could stay at the university, at the School of Literature and Art, teaching this history of Cuban thinking and so forth. So at the moment they created there a department for Cuban culture as general, with people for art and this and thought. So I could stay at the university, thank God, thanks to that. So during that teaching, there was a moment that many Cubans from the different universities had the opportunity to go to socialist countries' universities for specializations and this and that. So I could get to go to Germany, the German Democratic Republic at the time, at the University of Berlin, Humboldt, Berlin. So to get my sort of German PhD or something like that. I was not interested in a PhD or anything because I already had my Cuban, and that was enough for me. But it was the only way to get there and do research and get in touch and contact and this and that. So I went to Berlin. I was there first 1 year. Then when I came back to Cuba for a couple of years, went again another year, and I was at the Humboldt University. That was very important. Then I really got the possibility of the German to study Marx and Engels in the original language as part of it. And after my first year, when I got back, they were creating at the university the Faculty of Philosophy and History. So I was part of the board for the creation of this new, because history already existed, but was to be together with philosophy. All the plans, program, and all that with another 3, 4, 5 colleagues, we were making the whole thing. And so we created the program, and again I got into very difficulties. I started to teach even, and we got in very difficulty with the new dean of the faculty, who was a very sectarian, dogmatic, and it was impossible. He liked to persecute homosexuals, and it was impossible with him. So we had so many struggles and fights. That was really hard again. And so let's say that some colleagues saved me again. But a savior at this time meant go to Paris, to UNESCO as a professional at UNESCO. No UNESCO, the Cuban delegation or anything, but as member of Secretariat of UNESCO. And that's how I went to Paris at the beginning of the 80s, and stayed there working for UNESCO for 11 years. Which was good and bad at the same time. Bad because I was away from my real specialty, but good because, I mean, you get to go so many people, you live in a country and a city with such a rich cultural life, and your mind opens enormously and so forth. So I finished with the UNESCO year 82. I came back to Cuba. Finally, I couldn't get back to the university. What they offered me was absolutely sort of a lack of respect, almost. Second grade or something like that. But people at the Institute of Philosophy accepted me. It was collaboration, no contract, no money. I had my retirement from UNESCO. It was enough for me. So there I am still working and struggling for Marxism in Cuba. And well, you know, I conceived this journal Marx Ahora. I am the director of Marx Ahora. We conceived with that time's director of the Institute this cátedra, stool, yeah, stool is German, chair, Marxist studies chairs at the Institute of Philosophy. So I'm in charge of that. We organize mostly once a year meeting on Marxism together with other institutions. We recently, about 2 years ago, created a collective. We meet 2-3 times a year to discuss subjects. And here I'm in the struggle so that Marxism lives in Cuba, develops, so fight for attention from authority to support it and so forth. So probably I'm forgetting something, but it's so long so many changes in my life, I really forget.
So that's where I met you when you were in the Institute of Philosophy.
Yeah, I'm still now.
Yes.
And I'm still now. I'm still director of the journal Marx Ahora. So far.
Marx Aurora means
Marx.
now.
Marx now. Yes, I'm sorry, I should have. Okay, and then go all this contact with you, Remy, Luciano, in Germany with High Horse that already died, in Italy, so many places, colleagues from Latin America, in Marilia, in Sao Paulo, in San Luis and Rio, yes, okay. And then colleagues in, I don't know, Venezuela and Argentina, and we do whatever we can. Yeah, well.
So, but what would be some of the happiest moments of your life?
Oh,
Mostly in
concerning work, of course.
concerning your personal life or your...
Well, my mother created a very strong sense of family, a large even sense of family, and then also strong sense of close friend of family. We were like almost members of the family. Sometimes we were closer to this outsider that were no longer outsider but the insider. And some of my happiest memories is to keep the family, that each one of us in the family support the other, that we share happy moment and we are all there when something happens. And when a new member, so somebody married and a new member comes in, and they get surprised about how we stick together, how every time there is a situation, everybody sort of comes and is there, what is to be done, and everything that is for that moment, money, personal effort, everything. So I have many friends throughout my life. Most of them are already dead because, okay, they are contemporary, and I'm already 86, so. But I always created new friends. It's very easy for me. It comes naturally. So I'm very happy to have all these friends. Some of my best moments are at this moment. And then I had the luck and the privilege not only to witness an extraordinary revolution, but to be part of it, to participate, to contribute, to fight for it, to struggle for it. The privilege to follow Fidel Castro. That was one of my happiest, best decisions in life, the day I decided to follow Fidel Castro. And I've been faithful up to date, and I will be. That is clear, until I die. And many happy moments has been this revolution. So for example, the day the revolution won, even if I was in a hotel in Hillborough, I couldn't express my joy. But the day being at the Plaza de la Revolución, some of the speeches of Fidel, the day Fidel said to the United States Embassy that many members of the embassy have to go away and only 11 members could stay. We cried. I was with my sister, Aleida. Her name was Aleida, she already died. We cried there. We cried there. Then so many moments I can't remember, and lately, the last one, incredible, when Fidel died, and at the Plaza de la Revolución, you see, I thought that all my emotions connected with the Cuban Revolution were over, that nothing new could come up. And I was at home, of course, the television could be in De La Plaza now. And Daniel Ortega, in his speech, asked the people, where is Fidel? This, that, and he repeated, where is Fidel? And he repeated for the third time, where is Fidel? And this crowd spontaneously started crying, I am Fidel. Can you believe, at my age, I cried at home, alone there, I couldn't believe it. And I said, I thought all the emotion connected with the revolution were over. What else could I have? I had the luck to meet Fidel, to speak with him, with Che Guevara. Che Guevara received 2 or 3 times at his homes at the beginning of the revolution. He was staying temporarily in the beach because of his asthma. And with 2 other 26 of life movement, this enormous great man received us so naturally. First thing he did was to hear what we thought, because we were discussing what to do with the revolution and about the organization, and we came up with the idea. I had to laugh. And that was an enormous moment. The thing you see when you participate in a revolution, you are not aware of the great moment of the revolution. You are not. It's so natural, it's so everyday life, it's so common life that you are not aware what you're doing. At the National Theater, now today when you see this movement of modern dance, I was not aware that we were creating that. And then I meet my friend Ramiro Guerra, the choreographer that created the whole thing. And I see that, my God, that was possible because we were there, but we didn't know. We just didn't know. You see? And for folklore, the same thing. And you are not aware of it. For this aficionado movement, I don't know, we were not aware of it. And so, well, maybe that's where some of our happiest moment, and we didn't know. So, I don't know. To make new friends is such a good thing for me. To see this friendship develop and become deep and sure and loyal, and one is for the other one, and your spiritual life grows and is enriched. And because of the circumstances of your life, you get to know people from so many continents and cultures, but you meet them, but you go to those places and you see another way of life, another way of thinking that you didn't know it existed. And your internal spiritual life, it grows so enormously. It's so much enriched. And I think I'm living a spectacular moment of the history of humanity. It's so many difficulties, but for the first time human beings are struggling for a society without exploitation. So many important changes in the history of mankind, enormous. But this is for the first time we are fighting for a world without exploitation. It will take, I don't know how long, years and years, maybe 100, 200 years, 100 years, I don't know, maybe 30, 50 years. I don't have the slightest idea. But you are starting it. You are together with the people that are starting it. They are your companion. And you are making history without knowing it. It's now, these later years, that I become aware of that. I wasn't aware of that. And you see when you are a Latin American, and you see how much The imperialism has exploited this country and done so much harm. And I am still alive to see the awakening of it. And of course there are up and downs. If you are a Marxist, you know that that is going to happen. It cannot be a surprise for you. Of course it's hard to suffer it, but that's the way it is. And you are part of it. You are there. And you are still alive to witness it. And you think of all my colleagues, my friends, companions of fight that are no longer alive, and they didn't have the chance to witness that. And you are so lucky that you are witnessing it. But more than that, you are fighting for it still at your age. You have still the energy and the optimism and I don't know what. I don't know what. I don't know what chemical is inside there that push me. So I have no other answer than that. So that I was lucky, and I am, and it's a privilege. So many other people that fought and didn't see anything as part of the whole process. And of course, it was terrible the moment when the first experiences of socialism failed. But I knew we would be back. The conditions were still there, so it has to get back. I was in France, and some people that were against socialism and said it's over, and I said very quiet, it will come back. How? All Friday. You said, don't you see that conditions that created that are still there? Conditions created us and our efforts. We will be back and we'll try not to make the same mistakes again. So the bourgeoisie committed so many mistakes and came back once and again and again. So please, we'll be back.
So maybe you could tell us about your encounters with Che, and
Yeah.
what do you think of him and his legacies today?
Yeah. Well, that was the year 59. That's a very special year for the revolution. And the speeches of Fidel, Raúl, and Che were essential to every one of us because they sort of distributed among themselves the different tasks, the different messages, and so forth. So that was essential. Year 59, there were so many prejudices in our minds from ideological and political point of view. So the speeches of Fidel, Raúl, and Che were also part of the making of a new consciousness. And I mean, we follow their word regularly. So I was working, as I said, as member of the board of the province of Havana, the 26th of July, and one of our colleagues that was not from Havana, but from Central Province, Las Villas, he knew Che because he was in charge of propaganda of the 26th of July movement in the province Las Villas, while the Che was in province Las Villas at the head of the guerrilla, and therefore at the head of the 26th of July movement as soon as he got there. And they had established a good relationship between this colleague and Che Guevara. So while we were in this building working in the 26th of July, we became good friends, this colleague from Las Villas and I, and a third one. and we exchanged a lot about ideas. You have to imagine that Cuban and particular militants like us, it was all the time working what to do, the organization, this idea, this has to be done, this done. It was like boiling water, you know. It's incredible. This experience was absolutely incredible. And our minds and our life was more morning, afternoon, night, completely devoted for the task and the thinking and all that. And then one day he said that he was going to meet Che. Che was staying at this beach because of his asthma temporarily, and he said to the other colleague and I, come with me. So that was going at the end of the night. Our meeting with Che Guevara was at 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. That's the first year of a revolution. That's the situation. And you see, this man that was a great man already, but became even greater, was using his so complicated time to meet us. He didn't start saying, we have to do this, I have to do that. His position was always to create an atmosphere of confidence where we could express what we thought. He would hear you first, and no 2 seconds, but yeah. And he would ask a question, and he would then make a small intervention and open a new line of thinking, of a change. He had a tremendous sense of humor. This has to be known and clear, because and it was incredible. And then I remember, for example, one day we come over with idea how to organize the revolutionary organization, and he heard us and asked questions and so forth. And the idea we said was like a pyramid, the base and so forth, and at the top. Now, this is very important because it's plural. The leaders of the revolution at the top, plural. And then he looked at us with this ironic smile and his bright, tickling eyes and said, which leaders? I only know one. Which leaders in plural? Yeah, ¿cuáles líderes, plural? I only know one leader. So that's Fidel, we are no leaders. that was one of his sense of it. And then he was very much concerned with the unity of the revolutionary movement. And he insisted of the need of making one single revolutionary movement, organization, let's say, 26th of July, Party Socialist, PSP, Partido Socialista Popular, Popular Socialist Party, and this Directorio Revolucionario, the movement of the students that they were also in Las Villas with the guerrilla movement. And so he insisted on that, and he was aware that one of the main difficulties for this unified organization was the prejudices against the Communist Party, which was the PSP, the Popular Socialist Party. So he was very critical of people that would reject to work together with this party, with its member, that people that would not accept the need of unity of organization on the basis that they were absolutely against to work with the communists. That was his main concern as far as this subject is concerned at the moment. But he was also a man of culture, and we had some exchange, particularly with me, for the cultural thing, and he interchanged and discussed with me as an equal. He didn't think or anything. And of course there we had differences. Yeah, well, and he was trying to push more revolutionary culture. I wasn't at that stage yet. I hadn't become yet a Marxist. I became Marxist through an internal evolution, mostly throughout the daily experience with the Cuban Revolution, my engagement with the revolution and with Fidel. And that always was at the late at night or the beginning of, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, he would finish talking with us, maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Can you imagine that? I remember one day when we were leaving, and he had a meeting early in the morning. He said, his guard, you wake me up at 7 o'clock, it was already 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. And he said, and you, how do you say, you push me, you wake me. You see, this man with so many tasks, and he was sitting there with us and having this. That happened 2 times as far as I remember, maybe 3. And then the 3rd time, it was not any longer at this place, but in one office he had provisionally and this road that goes to the airport. And I was, it was September 59. I got an invitation to go to China as part of cultural delegation. It was an invitation from the Chinese, and that was, I don't know, 2 days before traveling or something. We went to see him because he invited us to go to his office, but we didn't have time. He had another meeting. We had only a few minutes, and then he asked me, are you going? And then the colleague told him, Isabel is going to China and so forth. And he asked me, are you taking with you our law of the agrarian reform? I said, no. So he went to his drawer and took one exemplar and said, you get that, you have to go and talk and explain it and so forth. So that was, for a period of time, the last time we met and we exchanged. But I would say the real exchange were the first one, when we talk politics, culture, situation, Cuba, what to do, and so forth. And he sort of gave us, particularly to me, a lesson of unity. Concerning the situation. I will never forget that, because I felt that lesson was particularly, for me, I didn't understand many things too well at the time. And this man, I have to say man in the sense of great man, it's a great revolutionary, but a great man. He took his time. And I had good relationship with members of this party. The problem for me was not to work together with them, but the direction of the revolution, I thought it should be the 26th of July. I had so good relationship with people, with colleagues and friends of this party, that for me, several years ago, at the moment I didn't get it, but for me several years ago was clear. Why did the Chinese invited me to China for the celebration of the 10th anniversary in this small delegation with Nicolas Guillen, for example, and great figures of Cuban culture? And I said, well, certainly Chinese ask the colleague, the friends of the PSP who to invite, and they gave my name, which meant they already understood me. They knew that I was sincere, that I was honest, that I had a good political position and so forth, and they were open to accept me and so forth. So one of the things I did when I visited China was to invite the Chinese for a spectacle for the National Theater with the Chinese opera the Peking Opera, and etc. And they accepted our invitation. They paid for everything. We didn't pay anything. And when they came to Cuba, they were received. A group of them, you said, the head of the delegation, but some member, the most outstanding artist, by Fidel and by Che. So that was the last time I talked to him, and the last time I had the opportunity was in his office in the Minister of Industry with the Chinese delegation. And well, he was very nice and very keen, so forth. But you know that when the people from the Chinese artistic delegation came here, and they gave the spectacle, the artistic spectacle that included the Chinese opera, I mean the Peking opera, Fidel and Che attended the spectacle. We didn't use the theater itself because it was not finished. We rented a better theater that was still private at the time, and we gave it there, and I had a photo with Fidel and Che in the theater. You see, this is one of my dearest pictures. Yeah, and it's very nice because it's clear that we were talking and we had the program is that they were asking me questions, particularly Che, what is this, what is that, but you can imagine I couldn't answer actually all those questions. So I tried to be very moderate in my answer because I was no expert, you see, but I had assisted. It was a month in China when we visited China. I have visited so many, so I could answer some questions because every night we went to the different Chinese opera, not only Beijing opera, but all the sections, Sichuan, Wuhan opera in different places. We were more lyric, we were more soft, less acrobatic and all that. I could explain some of this to him, which wasn't too much. And that was also a meeting, you know, was more or less at the same time. I think the spectacle at the theater was first, few days before he received the delegation. And what I think, what a great man, what a great revolutionary he was, is obvious. I don't want to repeat what is obvious and what is in the heart and the mind of all revolutionary of the world. But I think it was one of the essential Marxist thinkers of the 20th century, of the mid-20th century, a creative one. A very creative one, within principles. He was not a person that took theory with a lack of respect. He was very serious. He did study a lot. And for me, he, as well as Fidel, made a key important contribution to the Marx theory and practice, but always within principle, without looking for cheap originality, not to try to say something and nobody said it before, no. Creative, which means correct, in correspondence with reality to change it. And that will stay, and as a source of inspiration, and as a source always to go back to them, and to learn and to use it, to adapt to new situations. You know that in the last 10 years or something, new documents, manuscript from Che, from the period in Bolivia had been discovered and published. And one or two of them are theoretical. One of them is a kind of a draft of a small program. And that's the year 60s, mid-60s, and he's talking there of the role that the original indigenous movement has to play for the new Bolivia and the new Latin America. So already we can say that it's a man that is for today, and it's a man that's still for the future, because it's a method also, you know, it's the way you do it. When you enrich something, you do it following certain path, and that is also a lesson, not only the result but the path you are following, and that is also a legacy that we have to keep and preserved. And of course I had affection for him. I was a comrade of his wife Aleida, that was a comrade of the 26th movement also, you know, so affectionate links also for them, yeah.